Hey there and welcome to Geopolitics 411. Africa, of course, is mourning, and we're mourning the loss of about 22 lives in Angola, which shouldn't have been lost. And this is because these people went to the streets to protest against the high prices of fuel. So quite a sad state. I hope the country and the president and the government of Angola can find a balance so that we do not have to lose more lives. So far, at least 22 people have been killed, and this has happened between Monday and today. The protests began about 2 weeks ago when the government communicated that there was going to be a hike in prices, and that did not sit well with the citizens of Angola. So they decided to get to the streets. So since Monday, between Monday and Wednesday, the protests were really bad, and that is when we lost about 22 people. The most peculiar thing about this Angola demos on fuel is that Angola is one of Africa's largest oil producer. In fact, it comes in at number 2. But sadly, the country, like any other African nation that has minerals, does not have enough refineries to meet domestic demand. So it imports a lot of diesel and gasoline at high prices. These high prices is what now has affected the pricing of fuel in the country. And you know, when the price of fuel goes up, living standards, of course, are affected in terms of every other thing that is driven by fuel, even food. So with that, people decided in Angola, you know what, we can't take this anymore. We're going to the streets because we are demanding that the government stabilizes or finds a way to, bring the prices down. So Angola holds the second position in oil production in Sub-Saharan Africa, and this is according to the International Trade Administration. In 2024, in fact, Angola's average oil production was at 1.1 million barrels per day. And this was according to the Focus Economics. So far, with the protests that have been happening, about 1,200 people have been arrested in violence. Of course, when protests happen, mostly ends up with violence and stealing and, all that comes. Earlier in July, the government of Angola communicated to the citizens that they were going to remove the subsidies that have been there on diesel and raise, of course, the price with more than 30%. You can imagine if you've been buying fuel at, say, 10, maybe $1, then it's increased with 30%. Of course, that pain goes to the user, who's the consumer, and that is the citizen. So the 30% increase is what prompted public transport taxis to hike their prices. And now, when the government raised with 30%, that was on diesel, the public transport operators decided to raise their transport with more than 50%. So from 30 plus now the 50% because they need to make a profit, which for them is maybe the 20% and operational costs. So they got that to 50%. So this actually got the whole entire country angry, and people decided the rising cost of living is too much for us to handle in addition to that. So that is what prompted people to the streets. Day one, people just maybe gathered in Luanda, which is the capital of Angola. But as days proceeded, like on Tuesday, Wednesday, there were other 6 provinces where people stepped out and said, we actually feel the pain, we will not allow this to happen. And so they all go to the streets. So after that, when the government realized there were so many people, they decided to deploy the army to restore order as the riots triggered widespread insecurity across, of course, Luanda, the capital, and these other 6 provinces. At the moment, as we speak, we have about 1,200 people who have been arrested in violence that, of course, erupted during the protests. And this was sparked by the government's decision to raise the price fuel. So you raise the fuel, I don't know how governments imagine you would raise the fuel and the taxes that people have to pay. Then imagine that people will just move on as normal. That was very hard for them. Also, the question many are asking is why a country like Angola that comes at number 2, how hard is it for Angola to put up refineries that can refine this fuel so that it becomes affordable for the people of Angola, and even better for the African markets. Number 2, Africa has 54 countries. Why is it so hard for these 54 countries to come together and maybe have plants that can, process this diesel and make it easier for Africa to buy oil from across ourselves. I think it has a thing to with the people we put in places of leadership, because I want to believe we have a very educated group of young people and young Africans. If we were to put investments, not in corruption, but in development, this is something we would achieve as a continent, and we would be easily buying fuel at an affordable pricing. But what do they do? Put them in places of power. All they do is steal and accumulate wealth for themselves. And then the result, people get angry because you hike pricing and taxes, and people get angry and get to the streets. And then we are on the same cycle with zero development. Very sad situation there. So protests against the price hikes in Angola started about 2 weeks ago. Human rights organizations have accused the police of using excessive force against what was largely peaceful demonstrations. Usually, and this is across, I think this is from my experience even as a Kenyan, protests start with very peaceful. The moment the police join these protests, because they go out and start doing acts that are not acceptable by human rights and humanly possible according to the book which they follow, then they become violent because people retaliate. So even in Angola, it's the same thing. So police have now been accused of, harming people. They've arrested people. They've hurt about 197 people. So when you see all this, and at the end of it all, people are not in the streets to demonstrate for nothing. It's for a reason. If anything, the government of Angola at this moment should be rethinking and looking for ways, instead of importing diesel, because that now is where they had put subsidies. What do they do to then, for the fuel they have, then they can, be able to work on it and fix the nation. Rather than that, the government decides, no, we're not going to do this. We are actually going to punish our citizens. Quite unfortunate. So the president, Joao Lourenco, the cabinet, his cabinet met on Wednesday, and they received an update on the security situation and police response. However, instead of giving an assurance or maybe the plans they have to improve on this, the president's statement said that just came and reported we have had 22 deaths, 197 people have been injured, and about over 1,200 arrests have been made. 60 shops and vehicles were vandalized and all that, which is okay to give that statement, but I would have expected from where I sit, because people are protesting because of the cost of living, what is it as a government you're doing to improve on this cost of living? There was nothing that was mentioned. Are they going to sort the subsidies as of now? No statement around that has been issued. Are they going to work towards establishing refineries that can change, how Angola does its thing? Nothing of that nature was given. So you see, as a president or the leadership of a country, if they're not in a position to improve and assure citizens with such things, then what do you expect? This is just the beginning, and I can assure you, maybe it will cool down because, of course, the police will take position. But eventually, it will still come to bite them again. And I think it's time for African leaders across the continent to rethink how we work. And even us as a people, to think how we can do things so that we're able to challenge governments. And governments must work for the people, not for themselves or for the West. Because then, when you're importing, you're just taking money back to the West nations where you're importing from. For what reason? And you have the fuel in your own country, but you can't do nothing about it. That's quite unfortunate. And Angola has been actually removing the subsidies gradually since 2023, when the petrol prices back then had also triggered deadly protests. And this is what I'm saying. It happened in 2023. It's happening in 2025. You remove that, it's going to keep happening. So as a leader, how comfortable are you knowing very well your people are surviving on subsidies? And it's not because you do not have the fuel, you have it, but you cannot establish refineries. Why don't you work with agreements with these nations you're importing from? Like, it's a business. Maybe give them a percentage of ownership. Let them establish a company. Then your people benefit as a country, you benefit. And maybe the other person makes their own money. It's business. At the end of the day, nations exist with interests. And if we can't find interest and all we do is want to put our monies and send it to the Gulf so that we can import the fuel, then that's a wastage. And I think anyone who does that should not be in a position of leadership. So to the president of Angola, I hope you will take up the challenge and change the direction of your country. And it's not just Angola. This happens across the African continent. This is to all leaders. The opposition united parties in Angola gave a statement saying that there is a severe economic and social crisis that was as a result of government, that is as a result of government policies that are disconnected from the country's reality. This is not just for Angola. Cuts across every African nation at the moment feels there's a disconnect between the leadership and the needs of the people. I think for a long time, governments across Africa have operated as masters with servants. Now they have a very educated populace which is demanding better, asking questions, and because they are well exposed, they know what possibilities exist in Africa. So with that, we are demanding better. And I think for the old leadership across the continent, the time is up. It's either you shape in or shape out, because the generation we have, we know better. We know that Africa can stand by itself. We know that Africa can work, and you have just refused to make it work so that, you maintain a status quo. But this status quo is facing a shakeup. If you're in Angola, you can tell us in the comment section what your expectations are and how you're going to work around that. And if you feel the government is going to make it any better for you, and also, as a citizen, what you're doing to better your country. And this is across. Even us here in Kenya, we're doing the best we can to better our nation. As a young African, do not be left behind. Stand up for your country. Stand up for what is right. Thank you for watching Geopolitics 4-1. We'll see you on the next episode.